Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue our Asian horror retrospective with the 1987 film Chinese Ghost Story. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars and co-creator of the comic Psycom from Tokyopop, and Clockworks from Humanoid. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Drew Edwards, writer for Rockabilly Online and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man from Monsterverse Comics. Say hello, Drew.
Hello, all you beautiful podcast people.
Hello. And finally, also joining us from Denver, as always, color commentary from the one and only attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. According to Wikipedia, a Chinese Ghost Story, literally called The Ethereal Spirit of a Beauty, is a 1987 Hong Kong romantic comedy horror film starring Leslie Cheung, Joey Wong, and Wu Ma, directed by Ching Se-tung, and produced by Tsui Hark. And I apologize for my pronunciation of all of these names, and that's just me. The plot was loosely based on a short story from the Qing Dynasty, from the book Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio, and it also inspired another Shaw Brothers picture in 1960 called The Enchanting Shadow, which I have not seen. The film was popular in Hong Kong and several Asian countries, including South Korea and Japan. It boosted the stardom of Joey Wong, who plays the beautiful ghost who is enthralled to a great demon in this movie, and it won a lot of popularity for Leslie Cheung and sparked a trend of folklore ghost movies. It sort of kicked off, he'd been around, it kicked off the career of Tsui Hark in a major, major way. I know this is exciting to Joya because Hark is a fellow University of Texas alum.
Hook 'em horns.
Yes.
Right.
And on Texas Independence Day, no less.
This is wild because you went to UT. The other two of you are actually in Austin, where Hark studied.
And we lived in Austin for a decade.
We lived in Austin for 10 years. And so, in a way, Tsui Hark, although actually a Vietnamese native, he feels like a brother.
One of us.
You may not be from Texas, but Texas wants you anyway.
We want you anyway, and we certainly want Tsui Hark. This movie sparked a trend of folklore ghost films, and Joey Wong was in a lot of them. And there were 2 sequels to this film, a 2011 remake, and also an animated film that I remember I wrote a review for many, many years ago for Mania, which is still around. So, wow, this is our 3rd Chinese horror film. And Tony, you are our host through this amazing strange land, and I know that Drew was saying, thank you for bringing a lot of this stuff to us because it's opening our eyes to a lot of influences that we maybe weren't thinking about. So why don't you kick off our discussion of Chinese Ghost Story? Like, why this movie? Why this 1987 movie with Joey Wong? What brings us to it? Why did you want us to see it? And what brings you back to it?
Well, it's just something kind of different. It's actually more romantic than horror in a lot of ways, but I think the kind of gung-ho nature of it, and I just realized today I was thinking, oh man, I think we have like one more, but there's like 2 or 3 other movies at least that I kind of wish we had time to do. I definitely want to not wait another. I don't want to wait so long before we come back to Asian horror, if you guys will humor me.
Absolutely. I think the last one we did was 2011, with Legend of the 7 Golden Vampires. So
yeah.
So you're right. It was a long time.
There's a bunch, and I still if I come into some cash, I'm sending everyone a copy of what seems to be pretty cheap, the Negative Happy Chainsaw Edge, because I think that needs to be done at some point. But anyway, which is from Japan, and I still think we should do House. But as far as this goes,
I would love to do Wild Zero at one point.
Oh yeah. Well, let's make a pact that we need to come back sooner than later. But as far as Chinese Ghost Story goes, it was one of the first, there was a slew of stuff I started getting into some in college, and then others just because we had awesome, amazing video stores here in Austin when I moved here in '96, and you could get all these crazy, some of it bootleg, some of it like bought legitimately, but with some subtitles. It was all, some of it was gray, and some of it was just, hey, this is rare. It's hard to find it on VHS if you can't find it, but we have a copy, and that was always really cool. I was lucky enough that Max loaned me his Blu-ray of this, which is, the Blu-ray is beautiful. I definitely recommend seeing it if you can. I'd seen it for so long on like kind of faded prints with burned-in subtitles, and VHS copies of those prints, and seeing it super pristine was really something else. I really just enjoy the fight choreography. I think that this is where things start to take a turn towards the way that Chinese comic books kind of like look and are paced, and kind of the way that the action is drawn. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but it kind of reminds me. Unfortunately, most of the Chinese comics that were coming out a while back to capitalize on Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, like most of those companies don't put out Chinese comics anymore in the States, which is just really sad for me because there was some good stuff. But I think the pacing feels like that. Some great acting, great martial arts. There's, we're well into like crazy wire work coming into play, as opposed to kind of the more put a camera down fight choreography of Shaw Brothers, especially old school, Venom Shaw Brothers. Shot totally differently than that. Lots of flowy stuff, lots of smoke, lots of, there's lots of flowing things everywhere, whether it's flying through trees or it's, smoke effects.
Did he invent, this way that Tsui Hark shoots these scenes where, extreme close-ups of, like, people's feet as they're jumping and sword edges as they're flying at you and stuff. I don't remember the Shaw Brothers doing this kind of stuff. They kind of pick it up. There's, they had a lot of the older stuff has a different style. Remember, he didn't direct it, he just produced it. I'm sure he had a hand in it, but you're seeing a lot more. This is definitely, at this point, you're seeing a lot more of this kind of action, hidden Hong Kong movies, and just picks up from there. I completely forgot that he didn't direct this. So yeah, that's somebody else. That all those extreme perspective shots and stuff is the vision of somebody else. But he also produced. John Woo's first major gangster picture. Sure. There's a lot of this, like, action's different, turning differently. Oh man, he directed another one of my favorites, Duel to the Death, which is awesome. I'm gonna recommend that to everyone. Check out Duel to the Death. It's great. And he continued with like Shaolin Soccer and a bunch of others. Whoa. I guess he did action choreography and stuff. So. And so your opening thoughts are, watch this with me because there's so much new vocabulary being seen here that's... Oh, definitely. And it's got a little bit, it's another one of those kind of kitchen sink. It's got romance and a really cute story. It's got crazy monsters. It's got tons of kung fu. It's got wacky hijinks, mostly at the expense of the lead character. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome. And sadly, it's sad. Leslie Chung actually committed suicide. Max was talking about that too. We were talking about, and he was a huge star, like a singer as well as actor and everything. And sadly, having all of that, he still had a lot of problems with depression. It's really sad. He's so great in this. He's really, really funny. And that wasn't his main thing. He's got all these like music awards and everything. Well, and his messages are really heartfelt because he left. I was reading some of the notes that he left where he said, I haven't had to worry about money in a long time. I've had lots of success. I don't do anything wrong, but I can't get over how bad I feel. Is there anything that I can do? And people were saying, well, yeah, it turns out there are actually prescription drugs for that. He didn't want to do any of that stuff. It's also very difficult to get somebody who doesn't want to take medication to take medication.
Oh, of course.
And and he left to his own death. I think that was in 2004. I can't remember what year. It's just awful. I mean, and Joey Wong has kind of retired about 10 years ago, which is funny because she's not very old, but
hey, whatever, when you feel like it, I guess she's awesome. She's in a lot of great movies, so it's cool seeing her.
She's in Chinese Ghost Story 3, by the way, which is really great. She plays a different beautiful ghost. She played a lot. Maybe she just got tired of it. I mean, it's very possible that if you ran.
I really, really like Chinese Ghost Story 2, actually, but felt like it'd be nice to introduce, not start there. So part of the. It
turns out that I wrote a review of Chinese Ghost Story 2 a number of years ago for a Kung Fu guide, and I don't even remember why. I don't remember, and that's what happens after a while. It's like I literally have no memory of that film. Okay, Drew. What are your opening thoughts? Chinese Ghost Story.
My opening thought is this: as somebody that is a huge aficionado of 80s horror, although this has got a different vibe, I am glad some of whatever was in the crazy water that was going around horror films in general in the 80s was also flowing apparently in China, because this is a crazy movie, and I mean, I love the right kind of crazy. We talked about, I think a few weeks back about how American Horror Story always kind of overreaches with its crazy. This is like perfect levels of crazy for me. There's giant tongues, which made me way too happy because when I was a teenager, believe it or not, I had an unproduced comic book where the superhero was literally a giant tongue. So, and then, there's a monster that's made out of severed.
Superhero.
Yeah, there's a monster that is made out of severed heads. I love all this. I love the creepy stop motion or whatever they were, zombies. This is crammed to the plus it's a musical.
Yeah.
This is a musical. I really enjoyed the heck out of this movie. I didn't always know what was going on, but I didn't care.
Yeah. Very, very good. Hey, how did you find it? Did you find it on...
My friend Ivan, who is also, like Tony, also a very big fan of Asian cinema, loaned it to me. Thankfully, at the last second, because I had to work late and was not able to take Tony up on his very gracious offer to come over, veg out, and watch his place. But again, really enjoyed the hell out of it, even if it was a bit confusing to me at times.
Well, some of the subtitles don't help, and even the new Blu-ray is kind of sketchy on some of the subtitles.
I said,
I was explaining to Rain a few of the turns of phrase, which are just like, what the what? But yes, as I watched it, you kind of make sense of it. So
I didn't care. I was I had a free-willing spirit that was just kind of willing to go on with. Jamie was less forgiving. I think she didn't quite enjoy it as much as I did, but I mean, whatever. Spouses can always be on the same page.
Yeah, that's for sure. In fact, to that end, Julia, what do you think about this movie?
To that end, I'm having to be the Drew in this week's episode of not being the most fond of the movie like the rest of you. It's not. I felt pretty schizophrenic watching this film because I felt like at one moment I'd be like, yawn, and then the next moment I'd be like, oh, that's so cool. And then the next moment I'd be like, oh, that's pretty. And then I'd be like, oh, gross.
Yeah.
I was kind of all over the place. I did not like the giant tongue. I felt like it was a really bad porn movie in some spots.
The giant tongue never does anything lascivious, for what it's worth.
The giant tongue, if you need to rewatch the scene where they're it's attacking their faces and they're grabbing it with two hands and they're completely covered in sticky white stuff. I don't know. I thought it was pretty blatant, so I'm pretty surprised that you're not seeing it that way.
I did not. I mean, now I do, but I did not. I did not think of because tongues are not also.
But it doesn't look like a tongue at that point. It's in the close-up, whatever. Anyway, so I did not love that.
In fairness to Julia, the tongue did remind me of the tree from Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
No, there's something there. Actually, it's funny if you think about an influence this movie might have had. Evil Dead, probably the original Evil Dead, especially, probably has some influence on this, I think. And
then there's but the romance is nice. There's a lot of beautiful imagery. I liked the segment in the ghost world, or whatever you call that, the afterlife place. I don't know. That was really neat. It reminded me a lot of What Dreams May Come, which is one of my favorite movies. I really liked that part. I hated the ending. I mean, I was just like, what? Where's my Hollywood happy ending where they're like reunited in the next life or whatever, or something?
You haven't read enough
really
Chinese literature.
Yeah.
Well, but what's funny, Tony?
Well, she's going to be She's going to be reincarnated. There isn't like a heaven or whatever.
For sure, there was going to be a scene where he was going to meet a brand new baby and be like, "Aw," you know, or something. Maybe that's her. I don't know.
You and I have different opposing opinions about the Hollywood ending. I a lot of the times that makes me want to slap somebody. So.
Well,
no. But for what it's worth, the classic folktale also includes a happy ending, because in Chinese folktales they're all over the place as far as what ghosts can do, and there's plenty of stories where people actually manage to get a ghost's unfortunate side effects under control, and they marry the ghost and bring it into the house.
Mm-hmm.
And
ghosts in Chinese folklore seem to be decidedly more physical than ghosts in Western folklore.
Yes.
I do want to say one last thing before we move on to your conversation. I loved the crazy zombie skeleton stop motion guy, whatever they're called. Yeah, stop motion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love those guys. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I wouldn't add very much. I really want to get into some of the specifics of this movie, because I'm afraid that if you're a listener and you've been listening so far, I don't know yet if you've quite got a feel for what the hell happens in this movie. I was just thrilled to. I remember when I saw this the first time, it really opened my eyes, and I started taking the various things that I'd seen here and putting them into work that I was doing. You know, sometimes comic book scripts, sometimes, you know, screenplays that I was pitching. And what I found, though, was that if I did, you know, sometimes I had to peel a hell of a lot of it back, because I'd say, hey, you know what? And they've got these pages of the Bible, and when they stick the demon with it in the head, it freezes, you know, and stuff like that. People would just they would go, you know, this is too weird, it's too comic booky, nobody's ever going to buy it. But in these movies, you know, it's like, fuck it, there's going to be rose petals everywhere, and they're going to be flying through the trees, and you know, and everybody has superpowers basically, as long as they are sufficiently willful, you know, they can fly, you know. And
well, we kind of talked about that when we did way back when we did Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. You said that it was kind of operating, even though you did not like that movie, it was kind of operating on the same logic as these movies.
No, that's absolutely right. And you know, if that guy were here, he would probably say, listen, I'm using exactly the same logic and everything like that. You know, my problem actually with that movie was just that I wasn't crazy about the guy playing the president. But I mean, but you're totally right. Yes. And we still don't see this much. And so to some extent, I've never quite understood why there's this fear of putting crazy stuff onto the screen when, you know, Chinese ghost story is very, very popular. And Marvel's starting to come around and go, you know, it used to be like, you know, I don't know if we can have both Spider-Man and the Green Goblin in one movie, and now it's like, let's have a squirrel with a gun, you know, or he's a raccoon.
I believe you mean a raccoon, sir.
He is a raccoon, yes, I'm sorry.
Anyway. And with the amount of money he's made, I think he's Mr. Raccoon these days.
Yes. So, all right. So let me get back to the plot a little bit. All right, so we meet a guy called Ning Choi-san. He is I'll just call him the Scholar because I don't want to keep just ruining his name. But he is the Scholar. His job is he is a debt collector. He wanders from town to town collecting money for the emperor and for the government. And he's young and sort of inexperienced and easily intimidated, but he's willing to do this job. And he goes into this town that is, I kept thinking of Sweet Haven when Popeye walks into it in Robert Altman's Popeye movie, because the town is already just filled with crazy people. There are these I guess, government toughs who are always looking for escaped convicts and think that any loud noise that happens is an escaped convict that is nearby. And so they're sort of running up and down the street with their swords, grabbing people and seeing if they match their most wanted pictures. There are various people selling wares, and various people trying to get out of the taxes. And he's not able to collect any taxes. And in fact, by the end of the day, he's defeated. He's lost his paperwork. He doesn't have any money. I think he gets robbed at some point. And so he's like, where can I stay for free? And so they send him into the woods, and this is really where the movie starts, because he goes to stay in a temple in the woods, and he has exactly 2 roommates there. And one is a priest named what is the priest's name? We'll call him the priest. I think it's Yin, but there's a Taoist priest, just like in the last movie in Mr. Vampire, except for this Taoist priest is exactly the opposite. Tony, do you want to describe Yin, the Taoist priest here, or does anybody want to explain?
Well, he's fairly typical. I mean, he's also a swordsman, first and foremost, who's been, people always want to, that's the common trait in martial arts movies as well, is like you're always, once you reach a certain level, you're always on the run or being chased by, even if you're not on the run, being chased by people who want your title, who want to best you in sword play. So this guy's been, hunted down, and he's also, going from town to town, defeating supernatural things of apparently all sorts, because he seems to have a pretty wide knowledge, as well as just, he's good enough that he just doesn't really, he's kind of unto himself, he doesn't really want to get involved, but he will if he needs to. He's definitely the martial arts version of a gunslinger, by all accounts. And I don't know, he's pretty awesome, despite the sometimes shoddiness of his beard makeup in this movie, which I've never noticed until Blu-ray, and then I'm like, wow, ooh, that's not as good.
The subtitles that we had, his name for the character was literally Big Beard.
Big Beard, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I thought he was interesting up until the point when suddenly he has this meltdown where he's got this crisis of conscience or whatever, and he's like, I'm so afraid, and sometimes I pretend to be a ghost in front of people, but I pretend to be a person in front of ghosts. I don't know which one I am, and he's just crying. He suddenly becomes the Cowardly Lion or something. And I was like, what the hell happened to this guy? And then he goes back into superhero mode, which is awesome. His superhero mode is badass. What the hell happened there?
When we first see him, he springs out of the trees and out of the fog and flies and bounces off of a wall, and this guy feels things loudly. When he is having a crisis of conscience, he blubbers. When he wants to talk about the Tao, remember
he sings a song about the Tao.
Yeah, the Tao.
I call it his version of Frank Sinatra's "My Way."
Yes,
goes into
and it is. That's exactly. Other people have their Tao. This is my Tao. And he, in Mr. Vampire, the guy was this. The priest was this stoic, who was always calm and he knew great kung fu. But whereas this guy is he's fat and boisterous and loud and jumpy, and
he reminded me a bit of the kung fu version of Anthony Hopkins and the Coppola Dracula for some reason.
Yeah, boy, that's a wise thought. That's really interesting, and because Anthony Hopkins did play with that sort of crazy zany.
He's very, very. His Van Helsing is very big, and I mean that not physically big, but over the top.
Yeah, and it's funny because, well, in that movie, not luckily, but it comes after this, or else I'd think that there was, that he was maybe inspired by that, But so he's playing a very sort of, I don't know, he's a rambunctious priest, and it'd be funny to see him team up with the very, very different Taoist priest in Mr. Vampire. The other difference is, of course, the one in Mr. Vampire has a regular gig. He has a big, well-appointed temple. He has a couple of apprentices. He has lots of clients. He has colleagues, and he has regular money coming in. Whereas this guy is John the Baptist. He's out in the wilderness, and the only people he sees are people who are out to kill him and ghosts, which is why it's hilarious when this crazy student wanders in and throws down a pallet and just wants to sleep because... Well, you mentioned, you forget one of the most interesting, we're introduced to this guy while he's having a sword fight with someone who's there to kill him. Yes, I forgot all about that guy. Yeah, we first meet him, he's in the middle of a duel with a random other person who wants, who has come to, yes, and like Tony said, to seize Yin's title as a master swordsman. And they're hilarious. They taunt one another, and they have their insane acrobatics. And when we say acrobatics, please understand, if you haven't seen this movie, these guys don't just jump up and down. I mean, they fly. I mean, they literally just take to the air and float around. And it's this beautiful wire work. It looks great, too. I mean, considering the beard looks awful, but the wire work is great. You almost never see the wires in these guys.
No, it's really, it's pretty fantastic. It feels very comic book. And it feels, free. It just, I don't know. I know a lot of people are kind of anti-wire work because they saw it so much, or they're just that's not the true stuff or whatever, but I think it's pretty awesome.
I don't understand why Marvel doesn't import some of these guys to do a Spider-Man movie.
There's no reason you couldn't.
Who would? Who knows, man? At this point.
Well, I mean, hey, that may be what we get. They're rebooting Spider-Man yet again.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, these guys, this cast is all gone. Of course, Leslie Chung is dead, and Joey Wong is retired, and Wu Ma, who plays Yin, is also dead. He was already. He looks. The funny thing is, despite his crazy beard, he was already. Well, I don't know. He died actually just about a year ago, at the age of 71. So, he was in his 40s, I suppose, when he did this. But anyway, they're all but Tsui Hark's still around. He just made a big remake of this movie, which I have not seen. I have no idea if the 2011 Chinese Ghost Story is any good or not. Has anybody seen it?
I think I probably have. I can't remember exactly though.
Yeah, well, anyway, there is one, and heaven knows. But all right, so the scholar comes to the temple because he needs a free place to sleep, and people say, well, there's a ruined temple out in the woods. You can go stay there. And the first person that's staying there is this gunslinger swordsman who is there.
There's a lot of stuff in this that seems like it was cribbed from spaghetti westerns. I have to say, they even had an undertaker, taking the measurements of the kid when he came into town.
That's a really, really good point. There's a lot of spaghetti western stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that's out of the realm,
No, I mean, because there's trading back and forth. We're often not aware of it, but Tsui Hark's basically a Vietnamese guy who has claimed China as his adopted culture, but he's studying film at Southern Methodist University and the University of Texas in the 60s when all of the Italian westerns are coming out, which are, of course, influenced by John Ford, who's an American, and also a number of Japanese movies like Yojimbo, so basically, yes, these films are constantly feeding one another. So the next person that the scholar meets, after he meets the crazy old man who nearly kills him with a sword, is a beautiful woman, and I'm trying to remember how he meets the ghost for the first time. Like, how does she just turn up? Because I literally don't remember how.
She seduces the other swordsman who is.
Oh, we meet her first.
Been slain. He is sucked. All the life is sucked out of him by the giant tongue, and he turns into a zombie.
So we meet her first in that way. She basically shows up and seduces the other swordsman, and it turns out she's a decoy. Basically, this is her job. She is cute and she wanders the highways and byways, gets people to spend time with her, and then while she's seducing them, a demon comes and.
Well, it's great because they ring the little bell that's on her.
That's right. She has an ankle.
Really
she has the ankle bells.
Anklet, and then whenever that rings, it's time for turn.
Well, it's the dinner bell.
Yeah, exactly.
The demon comes running again, looking very, very much like the way the demon moves in Evil Dead, zipping through the woods and through the forest. And there's never been more dry ice used in any movie than in this movie because there's fog everywhere. And
you haven't seen enough of these. I'm sure, but it does feel like, especially when they get to hell, and it's just all.
Oh yeah, love hell. Yes. So,
I love the fact that are there wolves in China? That was the thing I felt like, that there's wolves that are chasing after him.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
I gotta be, man.
Are there wolves in China, or is that just something that they threw in because there are films that have wolves in it?
There's dogs and wolves everywhere. I mean, yeah.
Okay. All right. I apologize for totally not knowing that, but yeah, it's a good question. So yes, I've just looked it up. Yes, there are Asian wolves. I mean, and I guess that makes sense, but yeah. Well, good, because now
only also there. What's different about there is they're also like, well, there's wolves, but there could also be tigers, which is something we don't really, we have maybe mountain lions, but like flat out, he's like, oh no, there's a tiger, which is something that can happen because you forget that that could be true.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah. So we know now that this girl is a killer, and the next thing we know, she finds her way to the scholar, and because she plays, when she's not out seducing people, she occupies this amazing spot near the ruined temple, which is this little pagoda in which she plays a lute, a giant lute.
Is it a lute?
They call it a lute, and but it's a long,
like a slide guitar almost.
I'd never seen what the instrument was that made that, because it's a very common, obviously, instrument in all the Chinese music.
Yeah.
You always hear it, but I didn't know what the instrument was.
They call it a lute, whether it's actually.
There's an awesome movie called Deadful Melody where one of the characters uses that. Oh, and it shows up in what's the name? Not Shaolin Soccer, but Kung Fu Hustle. Mm-hmm. They rip it off in Kung Fu Hustle, but there's one called Deadful Melody where the sound from it is a weapon, as in like it's Deadful Melody, also awesome. But yeah, it's like the character plays it and destruction just is rampant, which is awesome too. So it's kind of cool to see like this very seductive version of that, and then to cut to another movie where it's it's super destructive power.
And of course, you would animate it so it would you would see beams of music eviscerating people. Oh, but I love her little pagoda, or what I call it. I know that's not what it is.
No, it is.
This thing.
Yeah, that's what they call it.
I think that's a Japanese word, though.
They called it. They actually referred to it as a pagoda.
Called a pagoda? Well, okay, all right then.
Yeah.
Anyway, she sits in this little pagoda that's on a lake, and it's separated by a bridge, and there are torches everywhere. It's just like
ghostly torches, though, because if you notice, they're green, like they're.
Ah, yes. Gosh, this is gorgeous. I mean, this is like something that I would say is aching to be ripped off, but actually, it just got used in Skyfall. I mean, James Bond, when he makes his way to the place where they do the betting on the Komodo dragons and all that stuff, he goes across a little moat very similar to this. This is a beautiful set for her. There's the temple set where, that's haunted, and then there's her own personal little lake, which is just a magical realm. And in this, in a way, Hark is giving us, or rather his director is giving us a vision of multiple levels of magical reality. There's the world of the town, which is very much like an old kung fu picture. It's just a whole bunch of people, many of whom are crooked, the government's not to be trusted. And then there's the ghostly temple, which is sort of half in our reality and half in another. There's the lake, where we begin to enter a really, really strange, mysterious, supernatural reality. And then later we're going to wind up in a world of pure spirit, which will be even stranger. So they meet, they fall instantly in love, and now it is a love story about, a young man and a young ghost, and each have the pressures. And does anybody want to, very quickly the young man finds, he visits the home of the ghost and realizes her family dynamic, because she has a family dynamic, which is hilarious.
Well,
so what the hell's going on?
The mother character or whatever is actually a man in drag, very strange character.
And this is the
you actually see that
the tree demon.
Yeah,
when they show her, quote unquote, in the tree demon guise, she looks more like Maleficent with the big weird hat, But in the house, it's just the regular man in drag.
Yeah.
And then there's the sisters, and one of the sisters is kind of meddlesome and a pain in the butt, and then the other one's just kind of oblivious. There are two others, right?
I think there's two sisters.
So then, anyway, so he's there in her house when they show up, and so he hides in the bathtub under the water, and so the meddlesome sister keeps kind of trying to figure out what's going on over there in the water. But everybody else, and then the mother, quote unquote, character is sure that there's a man in there. I don't know why.
She can smell him.
She smells him. Okay. But so he's in the tub, so she doesn't find him, and so there's all the kind of, like you said, like Tony said, the hilarious, or Drew, about the hilarious antics of the main character just doing crazy things. So that's one of them, is him trying to get air, and then at one point she has to try to distract everybody, so she takes off her clothes, like she's going to get in the tub or whatever, and so he looks at her, and he's like, whoa, she's naked, and I don't know, it's just there's a lot of that kind of stuff.
I love this business. I love when she kisses him.
Yeah.
And to push him back under the water. It's gorgeous. It's delightful. Tony, you were going to say something.
No. There's just a lot there. Also, it kind of mirrors. I don't know. I haven't read the original, but it kind of mirrors also the stepsister kind of thing, where she's got these two stepsisters and a mom. And the one is jealous because, evidently she's getting all the attention. She's going to get married to the,
that's
master,
right.
And then that's part of why she's kind of meddlesome, like, that whole dynamic of, well, why are you special? Like, what are you hiding? What do you have? It's just awesome. I just, there's so much going on. I don't know. I just really love there's so many bits. And again, I marvel at, there's a lot of movies that try a lot of things that just feel like that's too much. But for some reason, the way it all kind of gets blended just the right way in a lot of these movies. And I've seen a few where it doesn't work. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not like, Hong Kong cinema can do no wrong. But in what I've seen, there's a lot of just, for whatever reason, it just seems to work here,
Yeah.
I wish it worked more often in the West. I don't know what I think maybe it's kind of what you were talking about. We were talking about before, where people go, "Oh, that's too crazy" or whatever. So that even when people go completely crazy, it's either forced into like, "Look how crazy I can be," and that doesn't work, or they have all these ideas, but they're like, "Oh, maybe that's too crazy," so they pull back a little bit.
Yeah.
Whereas if you got to either commit or not, when you're going to make something like that. And I think the commitment to it here and in a lot of these movies is really where it works and why it works, as opposed to like, well, maybe I should dial that back. It's like, no, you got to go full on or not,
Well, I mean,
and if you're purposely trying to be crazy, that's easy to see as well. There's none of that. It's not like the filmmaker's like, and this will be the craziest. It's like, no, I have this vision for how this works.
Yes.
And just go for it. And it's a real difference in how you approach the media.
Well, the way I was thinking of, if there's never a moment in this movie, never, not one, and if it were a Hollywood movie, there would be. There's never a moment where anybody describes that there are, in fact, ghosts. There's never a moment when the priest explains, because I have very powerful chi energy, I'm able to leap tall trees. It's never explained. There's no moment when he was like,
I find that so refreshing. I just get so annoyed with this. Everybody, especially, as you said, we're starting to kind of get over that a little bit. But for the longest time, everything was like, well, we got to be grounded. We got to be realistic. We got to have explanation. I remember when Warren Ellis first started becoming popular, his one of the things he would often do was give these sort of pseudo-scientific explanations for things in his comics. And I just find a lot of that stuff obnoxious. Like, it just drains the joy out of everything.
I like it if it's just as crazy as the thing that you're purporting to explain. I mean, for instance, why is Superman able to fly? Because of a yellow sun. I mean, that's great. That's almost like poetry. Just to say, because the sun is yellow and it wasn't back home. That's fine, Right. But it would have been so horrible if this priest had to stop and explain, when I was 12 years old, I did not know, and then I came across this, this expert who began to teach me the ways of the Tao, and then soon I found that I was able to fly. Like, none of that, It's like, listen, you're in a movie like that. And it's like, it's already what we're familiar with if we say, read Marvel comics. In the comics, nobody ever bothers to explain in every issue, by the way, there are such things as superheroes, and they have many different powers. Normal ones fit into these types. Flying is often a part of it. You don't have that stuff. It's like, take it for granted. Captain America is right there. He doesn't fly. Others do. And that's great. I love all of this. And I think you're right, Drew, that Hollywood's kind of catching up now, and I think maybe that's Marvel. Maybe Marvel that brought that around. I don't know. Anyway, basically the two plots begin to come together like this. We find out that Joey Wong, the ghost, is betrothed to a big old demon who hasn't shown up yet, but he's going to marry her. So the young man, the scholar, is now essentially in love with a quintessential hooker with a heart of gold who is actually going to be betrothed to an evil person who's coming, who in another movie might be just a big gangster who has purchased this person from somebody else. And so he wants to rescue her because he's in love with her. And somehow he has to bring the Taoist monk over to this cause. But at first, the Taoist wants to kill because the Taoist is in the business of killing ghosts. How do you kill ghosts? I don't even remember how he actually dispatches them.
Well, he's got, a sword. He's got all the normal.
Right.
And he's got the sutra, which blows people out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. He has magic. He has magic paper. Blessing paper. He has swords and various stabby items that he can just sort of fill up with his chi energy and then throw them and make. And he also has this trick that he does that I ripped off for sort of Dracula, where he cuts his thumb and produces blood, which he can then do spells with on the palm of his hand.
Well, that's a really common one too. Like, as far as if you're going to need blood for a spell, you bite your thumb, and now you've got a pin, or fingers. Often it's either finger or thumb, and depending on what flourishes they're going to do and what the magic spell calls for, it's one or both, which always looks. I mean, it looks cool. Let's not forget. That looks pretty awesome.
It looks very cool.
And they're so awesome too, because normally you bite your thumb and blood comes out. You're like, ow, that's painful. But these guys are way too tough for that. It's like, oh, this is what I need to do. Wata, It's great.
Yeah. It is. That's very cool, and I like that they've created these sort of, they don't bog us down with rules, but that he has rules that he has to follow. And one of them is he can get extra power by bringing blood out of his thumb and drawing on his palm to create these runes. And he can when he sends a bolt at somebody. I mean, in a way, he's like Bishop. He's turning energy into plasma beams that he can just shoot at people. And they're not beams here; they're usually balls of fire or balls of energy. That's just really cool. They quickly make their way to the final plot of the film, which is they figure out, look, if we're going to free Joey Wong, love. We have a nice love scene and a love theme and all kinds of groovy stuff. But love is not really going to be in the cards. The best that the scholar can offer to this girl that he's fallen in love with is that she might be reincarnated. But to do that, he must find her ashes and give them a proper burial. So it turns out that that's how she became a ghost in Thrall, is that her ashes were stolen by this demon that she works for. So, finding her ashes will involve, let's see, they got to find the grave where her ashes are being kept, and then how do they wind up going to hell? Sometimes the plot of this just really goes really fast.
Well, she's got to go, and so they cut a hole. He's part of his powers. They cut a hole into the next universe, basically, and jump through. Because that's what you can do when you're just
because they have to defeat the demon. They have to defeat the demon before the sun comes up, so that they will be able to, basically free the demon free the ghost from the demons and give her a proper burial. And I apologize for sliding over some of that, because there are some particularities that are probably a little bit lost on me, and there's one hilarious moment when they get all the urns, and this is actually really cool. They get a bunch of the urns because they're not sure of ashes, and they're not sure which one is Joey Wong's, and so they lay them all out, and they open a bunch of them, and they free a bunch of nice little ghosts, and they're not Joey Wong. They're just a bunch of extra other ghosts. They're like, oh, thank you, and they're like, yeah, great, get out of here. And then behind them is Joey Wong, who's just sort of quietly waiting to be addressed, and it's really nice. So once they have her back, then they all make the trip into the Netherworld. And the Netherworld, Tony, do you want to describe the Netherworld for her?
Well, mostly, I mean, it's a weird. It's kind of the opposite of where you see a lot of white light and stuff like that. It's not, it's dark black with just copious amounts of fog machine and smoke and flowy things, and it's all cut really. There's lots of swooping cameras, and it's very disorienting in the way that it's shot, kind of purposefully. And the highlight is our monstrous ghost behind its veiled covering, which you see a similar but different kind of creature or person. I think it's a woman with I can't remember if it's a woman with a male voice or vice versa in Heroic Trio.
Yeah.
Their boss is kind of has a similar kind of setup.
And there's a pyramid that the demon just sort of stands on, waiting to be attacked. There's those. Okay, can you tell me? There are these staffs everywhere with these flowing white flags. Are those random, or do they have any particular meaning? There's friends of mine who know far more about this than me, but it's kind of the same as you have your army and it's banners, Yeah.
That are your.
These might be ghost banners of.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same kind of that's your affiliation kind of thing. I'm sure I'm missing some because there's, like I said, there's friends of mine who would instantly have that information. But it's kind of that thing where there is a ghostly army. It is a ghostly kind of fortress or area, and so it's kind of that kind of thing. That's always the impression I've got. And it's a wedding too, so there's all the banners and everything like that are at a wedding, especially a really formal, awesome,
right,
once in a millennia kind of wedding too,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's all of that. So I'm sure it all ties in. It's all tied into that stuff, Do
you notice that Joey Wong also, whenever she is doing anything, like when she's putting on a robe or making any sort of pose, she always arranges her fingers in certain ways. And I feel certain that probably the shape of her hands has meaning, that...
Well, there's that, and then the very, like, whenever she's demure, like, that's a very certain way of being demure. Like, kind of highborn, like, that's a very common...
Yeah, it's operatic.
That happens, yeah.
These things are things that we've seen in...
a lot of it comes from opera, like literally like Chinese opera kind of stuff too, so...
Yeah. Yeah, like when they'll arrange their hands near their chin in a way that's sort of supposed to suggest, I guess, delicacy. And so whenever a male character is doing a sort of a gag, drag thing, they'll do that same business, with their hands, making these sort of open outward palm symbols, that suggest femaleness in a way that's hard to describe until you see it, and then you go, wow, well, this person is pretending to be female with that hand gesture. It's interesting how much, and I know that I'm just missing a great deal. It would be really fun to watch this with, a deeply embedded lecturer, don't you think?
Definitely.
Yeah. Or maybe you could do. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have two friends in particular, Mark and Grady. Grady Hendricks also does a lot of novels and stuff too, but they definitely know their stuff, and I kind of wish I had more opportunity to just hang out and get their commentary, like get the running director's commentary on what was going on.
Well,
in fact, I said at one Kung Fu or Asian cinema marathon where Grady actually did subtitles as the film was playing. Like they projected his running subtitles because the print itself didn't have subtitles. That was cool to watch.
The Blu-ray of Robert Wise's Star Trek motion picture, they did a pop-up video kind of commentary that goes all the way through, and it's basically like an annotation, where it pops up and says, this is a reference to this, or this is and I would really like that with some of these foreign films where I don't necessarily carry, the cultural awareness of what some of these symbols mean.
That'd be
so
awesome.
There's a moment when they are attacking the demon and they tear open his robe and all of the souls that he has captured scream. and I love this because there's just all of these screaming heads under his robe, that I take to mean that those are the souls that he's captured along the way. I really, I couldn't begin to tell you. But,
See, I just took it as this monster's made of severed heads.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of the ghost kind of.
I'd buy that. I mean, that would also be good. I guess he could have anyway. And so he's like, I will unleash my severed heads upon you. And so they all go. This is what you were talking about, Drew, with the severed heads flying all around.
That was a really cool scene.
That is very, very cool.
I like that gag a lot.
I mean, it's neat. What's funny is I ripped this off actually for a short story once because I read that that the Vikings would fill the trees in Uppsala, Sweden, with the severed heads of their enemies, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if something brought those to life and they flew around? But that was because I was ripping off Chinese Ghost Story. But I'm waiting for somebody to do that, like in something that gets a lot more traction than a random short story that I wrote years ago. I mean, I would love to see, a bunch of severed Viking heads flying around.
Like I said before, that whole scene reminded me so much of What Dreams May Come, which is that Robin Williams movie about.
Because
they're in heaven,
find his wife. They're in hell. They're in the afterlife.
No, he goes to find his wife in purgatory or wherever she is.
Mm-hmm.
The point is she's basically she's kind of in limbo because she committed suicide, and so there's all these there's it's just very strange imagery. I mean, it's so bizarre and horrific. So I mean, that was much more vivid than it is here, but there's some of the similar concepts, I think.
Oh, absolutely. That's the famous myth of going down into the afterworld and fighting to bring back your love. It's funny to me that nobody dies. I mean, you would think that the mentor would die, wouldn't you? That Yin would sacrifice himself and the scholar.
Well, that's kind of a more Western concept, don't you think? I mean, that's like the hero's journey thing.
It is. You're exactly right. No, you're right. I'm forcing my Hollywood ideas, or the thing.
Well, I mean, that's not just Hollywood. I mean, that's a lot of Western. I mean, that goes all the way back to Arthurian stuff. But yeah, it's I don't know.
In a Hollywood picture, Yin would die. The priest would die. The scholar would do the final cool trick. And that would free the scholar and the young woman, and they would live happily ever after. Here, if I recall, it's the ghost who actually finally, they're all doing their different tricks, and the ghost does the final trick, and they manage to get out, and there comes the ending that Julia mentioned that she was sad about, which is that great, the big reward, the big payoff is honor. Which is that he is honored to be able to allow Joy Wong to have her reincarnation. There's no riding off into the sunset for the lovers. Although there is the riding off into the sunset for the two warriors. The demon. These two guys are now demon hunters together, and they ride off literally into the sunset and into a big beautiful rainbow. So there is kind of Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that was it. Just I'd forgotten about the rainbow.
Yeah, it's a romantic ending. I mean, and I don't mean like a homoerotic romantic ending, but a truly romantic, capital R.
Annoying. He even ends with, "I wonder if she actually got reincarnated." I mean, come on. That's so annoying.
No,
I like a certain amount of I cannot talk right tonight. A certain exactly. Like sometimes sometimes I want the Hollywood ending, but a lot of the times I can appreciate the not, and in this case, literally the not Hollywood ending. Like I would have been kind of irked if somehow it was like the perfect happy ending. We're like, oh, I'm not a ghost anymore. Let's go have babies. I would have had to withdraw some of my enthusiasm for this film if they'd given me that ending.
And it really feels like the beginning of a series now. When this happens, when they ride off together, you get the impression, oh, well, I have no doubt that I'm going to see more adventures with these two guys. That's going to happen. So almost like it's a pilot, and in a sense that is kind of Hollywood-like. So that's a Chinese ghost story. Is there anything before I get final thoughts, is there anything that we didn't touch on that really needs to be brought up?
This is one of those movies where I think you could talk 4 hours about it, because there's just so much going on.
Are there any movies where we could talk about 4 hours?
There are definitely some films where I quickly run out of I don't know what else to say about this movie.
Yeah, there's a lot to this. There's a lot of stuff in it. So that's.
Yeah.
And yet we all got really quiet there for a second.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, you could start. We didn't even talk about the haunted hotel. that they randomly wind up in, and how and the soup of heads that the demons are preparing for the feast. Oh, and a lot of really nice looking pastries. Honestly, it was really kind of funny. The demon wedding has this really great dessert table and heads in a bowl, and it's
right.
Yeah.
Well, demons like dessert too.
Of course, apparently. Yeah. All right. Well, let's do our final thoughts, and we'll come around again for endorsements. Tony, if somebody's listening to this, how would you wrap up why they need to, run, not walk, to go get Chinese Ghost Story?
I don't know. If you like horror, and/or you like romance, and/or you like martial arts, and you like really awesome fight choreography and visuals, I could see how maybe you wouldn't like it, but there's a little bit of everything for you if you want to delve into this. And the romance is nice. The creatures are cool. It has that, what the things we liked about Evil Dead. There's stuff like that there. Yeah.
This was I think this was a great one for you to suggest. Drew, any final thoughts you would like to share with us about Chinese Ghost?
Well, as I was saying to Tony before we actually started recording, thank you for introducing me to Asian horror cinema, because it has given me a whole new world of horror films to rip off.
Anytime you want to watch them. Sorry to interrupt, but I get excited too. I have a lot. I can tell you
okay. more. No. We may be doing that. I don't know if I liked this one quite as much as I liked Mr. Vampire, but I was still very taken with it, and like I said, most of my Asian cinema is actually Japanese, and it's like Godzilla films or Japanese zombie movies. So this has been interesting to delve into, and this movie does have a lot going for it, and really, as a monster fan, the craziness of the monsters, just that hit a lot of the happy buttons for me.
Right. Cool.
Julia, Chinese Ghost Story, final thoughts?
I think I've pretty much said my piece at this point.
Okay.
I don't really have anything to add.
All right, very good. And I certainly won't add anything else other than, it's been a really, really great one to be reintroduced to, and I've missed watching this, and it has a really good pacing. The movie doesn't, in my mind, the movie doesn't really get boring. It moves along really well. It has an almost Western sense of pace, and yet at the same time some really, really great visionary moments. So let's do endorsements. I don't know if you have anything to endorse. You don't have to, but if you want to share with us what you've been listening to or watching or reading, let us know. Tony, got anything for us this week?
Well, again, Austin fans, if you want to come see what I do with Deserts of Mars, we're having another show at the Lost Well this weekend with a band from out of town called Mothwind, a friend of mine's band, Caesar, and another band, Duel, which is awesome. They're really, really good, another local band. So if you are in Austin and you listen to this, we're at the Lost Well, and Caesar's recording their show live, so if you show up, that'd be cool. I, again, suggest, last time I suggested some, watch more Asian horror. I think Drew's mirroring that, but it's sad. Most of them are out of print, so it's hard for me to really recommend it. But if you do get a chance, and also I don't know if any of them were completed, there's some really great Chinese comics that came out, like I said, post Crouching Tiger, that are really, really awesome. In fact, they did the Crouching Tiger comics, which Crouching Tiger was that movie was a subsection of a longer, much bigger story as well. The pacing of Chinese comics is it's way different than how manga is put together in Japanese comics or manhwa, Korean comics, and definitely different than American comics. I think they tend to be more dense. They kind of do throw a lot of stuff, you know. And there were some really successful ones. There's some cool movies. The Storm Riders, for example, was a great, you know, action adventure period piece, and the comic was really cool. I don't know if they ever.
I enjoyed Storm Riders a lot. I remember that one.
I enjoy it a lot too. I know a lot of people who didn't like it, but I think Storm Riders is great. And so if you can find out, if you like this kind of stuff, and you should, you know, read a few Chinese comics here and there. They were pretty cool. They may be harder to find, and I don't know if they completed very many of them, which is sad because I wish it would have taken off. They were kind of banking on, you know, manga was hitting big at the time, so why not comics from all over the world? It didn't pan out, despite the fact that they're really beautiful, nice watercolors. It's just a shame, I think. I'm kind of sad, but it does take reading Chinese comics took a little bit more. They're a little bit more dense. So, but if you can get a hold of some, I think they're cool. In addition to, you know, also watch more Asian horror. It's, you know, especially Hong Kong. I think is some of my favorite. Because it has such craziness like we see in these films.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Drew, did you have any endorsements for us?
Well, first off, I want to mention before we actually, like about an hour before we were recording, I read this really great article on Badass Digest written by Todd Farmer, who is a screenwriter. Most horror fans will know him from he did the My Bloody Valentine remake and Jason X, and also Drive Angry, which was kind of a Nicolas Cage B-movie vehicle from a few years back. And it's very, very humbling and, you know, good food for thought for anybody that's thinking about going into writing, because he talks about, you know, what it is like to go from being a somewhat successful screenwriter to a guy that's written a couple of things that are considered bombs, and, you know, actually at one point living out of his car. And, you know, but through all of this, you know, if you're, you know, the message of, you know, well, if you're a writer, you're going to write whether or not you're living in your car or you're, you know, a Hollywood player. And I just thought it was, you know, very, again, it was very interesting considering some of the frustrations I've had in my life in the last few years. So I found it to be a really good read. So if you can get on Badass Digest, you should check that out. The other thing I would like to endorse is actually a 1930s movie. Because we've been on our Asian kick, I've actually gone back around and gone pseudo-Asian. And I've been getting into, you know, sort of resurrected my interest in the Fu Manchu character, which is kind of a double-edged sword if you know anything about what the character is. And usually in films, he is portrayed by a white man in makeup to make him look Asian. In this case, the film I'm talking about is the Mask of Fu Manchu, which is a really batshit crazy pre-code Hollywood horror film with lots of kink and torture.
Fair, right?
And at one point, they actually used a real severed hand in the movie. So, you know, it's crazy to think that at one point MGM was like, well, you need a hand for a prop. Just go to the morgue. It's one of the, even though it's kind of even though it's kind of un-PC to say, I really love Karloff in this part. Like it's you know, he's very charmingly evil, and he's just a great supervillain. And a couple of years back, they put out actually with the first, because for years the movie was available only in extremely cut versions of it. So the best way to view this movie is to get yourself on the uncut remastered DVD that came out a few years ago, because he really, if you're interested in vintage horror and Karloff, any of the stuff. It's got Myrtle Loy in it as well, also playing Asian. Again, double-edged sword. These movies are relentlessly un-PC, but if you can go in that with knowing that you're going to have huge dollops of liberal guilt from watching the movie, you'll have a lot of fun.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful suggestion. I think you can learn a lot by watching things with ideas that we no longer agree with. And yes, Tony, you and I watched this movie.
Yeah. We watched it at Banamathon, right?
That's right.
1 year. Yeah. That was awesome. I mean, for awesome in the same ways that Drew is talking about, and also terrible for the same ways.
The funny thing about the movie, I would actually really like to do an episode on this movie at some point, but that might be a bit of an indulgence. But I will say this: it's
our podcast.
Yeah, we can do anything. The question is, how many evenings are there to do podcasts? But you bet. Yeah. Great tip. That's a really, really great tip. Julia, did you have anything to endorse for us?
Well, I think I've already endorsed it, which is What Dreams May Come. I just think the movie is so beautiful and interesting, and it just really messes with your head. So I think as a follow-up to this one, if you can find this one, then you should watch that one.
Richard, well, this one is available in Blu-ray. We watched it online, but yeah, What Dreams May Come, man, that's Richard Matheson novel, I think, originally, and a great movie with Max von Sydow and Robin Williams. So for my endorsement this week is a wonderful article, and on TV tropes. So the hilarious thing is that you could read this article, and the fact is, you can read any other article. If you go to tvtropes.org, you can wind up getting sucked in and just look up, and many hours have passed. Yeah. Go ahead.
For an unpopular comic book, Halloween Man's in a surprising number of those TV tropes. Thanks.
Good for you. That's fantastic. That's outstanding. Yeah. No, I mean, TV Tropes is a website where they take an idea and they explain the idea that you've seen in a movies or books or whatever, and they give examples in different works of art. The article that I found so fun this week was called Not Using the Z Word. And what that refers to is this curious thing in the movies where you have a supernatural or a similar idea that everybody in the movie and everybody watching the movie recognizes, and yet everybody refuses to use the most common word for that thing. And so, for instance, you got corpses that are getting killed and coming back to life and shambling and eating people, but somehow nobody dares to use the word zombie because they figure that zombie is too silly a word, or they won't use the word vampire. Or my favorite is in superheroes where you've got the absorbing man, but nobody will call him the absorbing man, and no one will call Iron Man Iron Man. And at least in Marvel, in the recent movies they call him Iron Man. But if you notice in the first Iron Man movie, they didn't call him Iron Man till the end, when the newspaper calls him that. And
that was part of a different trope where the superhero is named by the media.
Yeah, well, yes, that's right. Like Superman in Man of Steel, they go, they're calling him Superman. The newspapers are calling him, which is common. Batman, at least Batman in Batman grabs the guy by the collar and pulls him real close and goes, "I'm Batman." I mean,
and then they did that again in Batman Begins, but I think that was more supposed to be an homage to the Burton one.
That always reminds me, though, that I think it's College Humor has the skit with the Batman where he's trying to find his voice.
Yes.
Which, if you haven't seen that makes me laugh till I hurt every time.
Swear to me.
Yeah.
Like that, I can do it like, swear to me.
Yeah, so good.
But not using the Z word. So, and the reason given is always, if in our movie, if we call them vampires, that people will be pulled right out of it because vampire is such a silly word. So
Except that there's freaking vampires in your movie.
Except for you have made a vampire movie, sir. That's what you have.
My favorite rebuke of that is actually in Shaun of the Dead, where one of the characters finally says zombie, and then Sean's like, "Well, don't say that. That's ridiculous." And I was like, "Well," the other guy's like, "Well, aren't they zombies?"
Exactly.
You know, and
I can't say vampire in my vampire movie.
Right. Man, we've seen movies that actually get completely sunk by this, you know, where somehow between making the film and selling it, you know, they decided, you know what, like in I Am Legend, for some reason in I Am Legend they could not call them either zombies or vampires, and in fact in the ads you weren't even sure what the heck he was hunting or being hunted by, you know, and
starts my newest horror movie craze, which will be vampires.
Well, they actually already in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer comic book, they already beat you to it. They have zompires.
Yes, but see, that's different than vampires.
Oh, okay.
Just so you know,
totally different.
Another trope.
They're more vampire. I don't know.
So another trope in TV tropes is our vampires are different, which is where people rather, you know, people have to explain what's different about their vampires from other vampires, which is true. Every vampire movie has to lay out its rules. But the bottom line is, look, you know, I can be bored by vampires, but if I go to see your movie and you do something interesting, or I even just want to see whether your character survives because I like them, you know, all is forgiven. I mean, but I loved just the contemplation of reading this thing called Not Using the Z Word. It was really cool.
Our vampires are different. They drink from their butt.
Yeah.
How about that? Totally different. It sounds like a trauma film now that I think about it.
That or a Cronenberg. And that brings me to my other suggestion, which is that I went to a midnight showing of Cronenberg's Videodrome with James Woods, which I hope that someday we do. We should do a whole... We've actually had on the slate for a while something called body horror, which we haven't gotten to this retrospective yet, and I think all of us are
That's the one where I'll probably not.
Well, all of us are a little worried about it. You know, I can tell you right now, we're not doing Human Centipede. I don't care.
No.
That is not body horror. That is torture porn. All right. I'm going to stand by that one. And I won't do Human Centipede because it's not a horror. I don't even consider it a proper horror film. I consider it a Wayans Brothers film. They somehow got labeled a horror film.
They somehow took all the jokes out. Yeah.
No. The jokes are still there. They're just not funny.
All right.
They're on the viewer, and they're not the laughing kind.
Human Centipede 2, Centipede harder.
All I'm saying is that if we do body horror, we'll do other movies, and one of them, probably several will wind up being Cronenberg, and maybe we should just call it the Cronenberg retrospective, because, boy, that guy is obsessed with whack-ass body stuff. You know, They Came From Within, and The Fly, and I'm trying to think. You know, we talked about it. We haven't done Existence, but Videodrome, 1982, Toronto. James Woods plays the executive at this sort of up-and-coming, scrappy TV network that gets by playing a lot of like weird cable access stuff and softcore pornography, but he's looking for something harder that will really put his station over the top. And he comes across this weird torture porn that may be coming out of Malaysia and might be coming out of Pittsburgh. Not making this up. And so he starts dating Debbie Harry, who is like a crazy S&M therapist type person, and she becomes obsessed with getting on the torture porn channel, and he gets sucked into this thriller involving where exactly this stuff is coming from, and soon he's hallucinating that he's got a weird vagina in his stomach that he can put videotapes into. It is the weirdest, strangest movie, and a horror movie, and I highly recommend it. It's very strange, and I
always like when you recommend that, because I just picture Julia going, just shaking her head like, I bet you do.
She's like, not me. It's like you can bring in Max on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, endorse the Where's my husband? Like I just picture the look. I can see it.
It was a great movie to see at midnight, downtown at like the Crazy Art Theater in Denver. Because, you get out, it's a bleak movie. It's very depressing.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't give you much hope for the future. And I get out and it's like 15 degrees. And
in fairness, Goonies didn't give you much hope for the future, so you're just a bleak kind of guy.
It's true. Yeah, actually, these kinds of things, the darker ones sometimes give me more hope, and the relentlessly happy movies often give me less hope because I have this sort of snapback sense of sadness whenever confronted with great joy. But which is just horrible. I mean,
wow. We delved deeper than I thought this time in the podcast.
Well, this is what Jason is doing instead of therapy. It's cheaper.
Yes.
I see. Oh.
Yes, it's also so effective.
No. Truly, that's not true. I love joy. I endorse joy, and also
I enjoy joy. He endorses joy, folks.
Oh man!
All right, I gotta go. We all gotta go. This has been fantastic, and we're not even done yet. We've got one more week of Chinese horror. What is it next week, Tony?
Well, Asian horror. I think we're going to do Ringu, the first Ring movie. Which we say Ring. People often say Ringu, but it's in Japanese. The U is kind of the U is kind of, it's almost silent, but it doesn't look right when like to hear it pronounced correctly.
It should be something more like Ringu or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's not Ringu.
It's just a written out version of a Japanese pronunciation of the word ring.
Like, yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen it, so I'm looking forward to that. And thank you, everyone, for being so patient and listening to us ramble on and also get really excited, and we hope you've been excited too. If you are interested in discussing any of this with us, come to the Facebook page, share your thoughts. We want to hear from you, and we will totally engage. Leave reviews on iTunes. My goodness, it really matters. We read every one of the reviews and shake our fists at the heavens when we feel we have come short. So thank you so much. Bleeding Cool guys, we're really glad you're here. We will see you guys next week. Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic week.
Bye.
Bye.